Okay, so we'll be continuing with the brain of the frog, and here you can see the figure which shows the structure of the brain. Okay, so here you can see this part is the forebrain, okay, till here, right? And then this part which includes the two optic lobes, that is actually the midbrain, okay, and posterior to the optic lobe, it is actually, this part is actually the hindbrain. This is actually spinal cord, okay. So we are speaking about this, what you call the brain, so it is still here, right? The last one, ninth and the 10th cranial nerve, that's the vagus nerve. So you can see till here it is a brain, and this part is the forebrain, and here, and this is the midbrain, okay, and this part is the hindbrain. Now, in the case of forebrain, you can see it is composed of the cerebral hemispheres. Okay, starting from the anteriormost, it is composed of a pair of olfactory lobe. You can see cerebral hemispheres a pair and a diencephalon, which is actually hidden. It is not so clearly visible from the dorsal side. Okay, and then you have the midbrain, which is composed of a pair of optic lobes. Then hindbrain, which is composed of cerebellum. Then this part is actually the medulla oblongata. So cerebellum and medulla oblongata, it forms the hindbrain. From the optic lobe, you can see arises, each of the optic lobe gives off a olfactory nerve, right? So that is the first cranial nerve, that is the olfactory nerve, right? And then olfactory lobe, obviously, as the name suggests, the main function of olfactory lobe is to coordinate the olfactory function. So what about the next one, the cerebral hemisphere? Cerebral hemispheres, we have already seen that the cerebral hemispheres do have a structure which is referred as the pallium, isn't it? The thick roof of the cerebral hemispheres, it was referred as the pallium, and the pallium controls the activities of the olfactory, tactile, and the optic organs. Whereas the cerebral hemispheres, they generally coordinate the activities of the neuromuscular mechanism of the body. But these are supposed to be the seat of intelligence as well as the voluntary control in higher animals. Obviously, in frogs, it is concerned with the neuromuscular activities. Okay, the cerebral hemispheres. Now, diencephalon over here, it is actually the region of the brain that controls the metabolism of the fats and carbohydrates and also regulates the genital function. Now, diencephalon on the ventral side, you can see how it is. Okay, so this is actually the optic chiasma. Somewhere this is the optic lobes. Okay, optic lobes are visible only on the dorsal side. On the ventral side, it's not visible, isn't it? But you can see that from the ventral side of the optic lobes, a optic nerve arises. Okay, from each of the optic lobe, an optic nerve arises, and it moves towards the opposite side. That is, from the right optic lobe, the optic nerve arises and it moves towards the left, while from the left optic lobe, you can see it arises, the optic nerve arises and it moves towards the right. So what happens is, just ventral to the diencephalon, these two optic nerves, they cross over each other, and it forms a structure known as the optic chiasma. Okay, there's an A over there. So optic chiasma. So this is actually on the ventral side of the diencephalon. So the optic chiasma actually indicates the region of the diencephalon on the dorsal side of the chiasma here. Okay. Now this part, it is actually, you can see hypothalamus, this structure. Okay. The hypothalamus, it is present on the distal side of a knob-like structure known as infundibulum, which arises from the floor of the diencephalon. That is, this part is the diencephalon. From the floor of the diencephalon arises a small stalk-like structure which is known as the infundibulum, and that on the distal end, that is on the free end of the infundibulum, you can see the hypothalamus, the hypophysis. I'm sorry, hypophysis. Okay, so it is not hypothalamus, it is hypophysis. Okay, here it is written pituitary, and so that is hypophysis. Okay, so hypothalamus is actually the floor of the diencephalon. So I hope this is clear. Okay, hypothalamus is the floor of the diencephalon, and from the floor arises an infundibulum structure. On the distal end of the infundibulum, you can see the pituitary or the hypophysis. Okay, so this is the whole part, and you can see this what you call diencephalon is associated with the third. You can see here. Okay, third cranial nerve. The second cranial nerve is the optic nerve. Okay, first cranial nerve was olfactory, second is optic, and you can see third arises from the diencephalon region, which is coordinating the metabolism of fats and carbohydrates. Okay, now the next part you have is this cerebellum. the cerebellum over here, cerebellum and the medulla oblongata. Obviously, optic lobes needn't mention it because optic lobe, the name itself suggests it is concerned with the sight, control of the movement of eye muscles, coordinating the vision, etc. That is the function of the optic lobe. Now, what about the cerebellum? Cerebellum controls the mechanism of autonomic movements and also brings about coordination in the movements of locomotion. So, it is in correlation with the medulla oblongata and regulates the complex muscular movements of the body. Equilibrium, then all those are being controlled by the cerebellum. So, it is movement, the locomotion, the coordinated activity, the equilibrium, etc. It is actually coordinated by the brain. Now, then we have the medulla oblongata, that is the last part of the brain. A medulla oblongata, it is actually a very important nerve center which actually has centers of all the reflex functions. It regulates those functions of the body which are not directly under the control of will. That is, it's completely voluntary in functions. For example, respiration, swallowing, heartbeat, hearing, taste, secretions of certain this one digestive juices or even sound production, etc. They are not voluntary. So all those involuntary actions or activities or functions are coordinated by the medulla oblongata. So I hope it is still till here it is clear. Okay. So these are the main parts of the brain. So here you can see this is actually dissected part. Here you can see the olfactory nerve, the olfactory. This is the olfactory lobes, actually olfactory bulb or the olfactory lobe, simple. Okay, and this is the cerebral hemispheres, very clearly seen. The optic lobe, you can see over here the optic lobe, and this part is the medulla oblongata. Okay, so you can see this is the dissected part of the brain. The whole brain is actually dissected out to dissected open to be seen here. Okay, I hope it is clear. Earlier when we were studying BSc, we had to actually cut open and dissect open the brain. So that was a practical. That was in the practical part. All right. Now about the ventricles. Okay. So actually, what are ventricles? Ventricles are actually the cavities or place this one inside the brain. Okay, and all the major brain parts do have the ventricles. The central canal of the brain actually do have the local expansions, and these are referred as the ventricles. And you can see the ventricles of the medulla oblongata, it is referred, okay, starting from the anterior, we can start. It is from the olfactory lobe, it is referred as a rhinocele. So since there is a pair of olfactory lobe, a pair of rhinocele is found. Then next posterior, it is the cerebral hemispheres, again two hemispheres, so two ventricles, a pair of paracele, or it is otherwise known as lateral ventricles. The third ventricle that is present in the diencephalon, it is referred as a diocele. The diocele or the diencephalon do have the lateral walls, which we have already mentioned as optic thalami. The floor of the diencephalon, it is hypothalamus, and the roof do have vascular tract. It is known as anterior choroid plexus, and then on the ventral side they have the pineal stalk. Okay, so the paracele, they actually they are independent or they are completely separated in the two cerebral hemispheres, but towards the posterior part, that these paraceles they unite. Okay, they communicate with each other, and similarly with the ventricle in the diencephalon also it communicates with these two paraceles through a common opening which is known as the foramen of Monro. So here you can see this is the foramen. Sorry. This is the foramen of Monro. Okay, so these are the two lateral ventricles, and this is the foramen of Monro. This is the diencephalon. Okay, sorry, diacele. So the diacele, it communicates with these two lateral ventricles. So these three ventricles actually communicate with each other by a small opening. It is known as the foramen of Monro. Okay, now the next one we have is the optocele. The optocele, it is the what you call ventricle inside the optic lobes. Again, a pair of optic lobes, so two optoceles are there, and these two optoceles, uh, yeah, you can see it opens into iter, or it is otherwise known as the aqueduct of Sylvius. So the extending between the diencephalon and the ventricle in the medulla oblongata, you can see the aqueduct of Sylvius. Okay, optocele communicates with the ventricle in the medulla oblongata via the optocele. Okay, and the metacele, it is actually the ventricle in the medulla oblongata. The vascular roof over here, it is actually vascular in nature, and we already saw that there is another vascular roof in the diencephalon. This is another one in the posterior part, so it is referred as a posterior choroid plexus. So these are the structures which are associated with the ventricles of the brain. Here you can see the ventricle in the olfactory lobes, a pair of what you call rhinocele. Then you have a pair of lateral ventricles. Then we have the diacele. The diacele and the lateral ventricles are communicated by foramen of Monro. Then we have the next one we have is the ventricles in the optic lobes, that is the optocele. These two optoceles are independent. They are continuous, or they communicate with the aqueduct of Sylvius, or what is referred as the iter, and it is through the iter it opens into the next ventricle, that is a metacele in the medulla oblongata. Okay, and it continues into the central canal of the spinal cord. It is the central canal or the spinal canal. So this is the figure. So you have to learn the diagrams of what you call the brain of the frog, and then the figure which shows the major ventricles of the brain. Okay, so I hope it is clear. Fine. Okay.